The question was, how easy is it to plagiarise a PhD? Well, actually nowadays probably quite difficult.
Quite easy with AI, isn't it?
Quite difficult because the ability to search through databases of other material will mean that certain sentences, phrases, terminology and so on will be identified by plagiarism tools. Whereas in the past, let's say 30 years ago or even 15 years ago, even 10 years ago actually, when I did mine, it was much more difficult. Because
project your voice
if someone...
It's good when you project your voice.
I project my voice when I need to.
Too soft.
If I was to project my voice too loudly...
The question is, was it plagiarism or a question? Was it actually plagiarism?
Well, there were two studies done of this. One said it was partly plagiarism, another said it wasn't. So I haven't looked at the PhD, I haven't studied it. Is it possible to do plagiarism? Yes. Are most PhDs in reality plagiarism?
Yes.
Yes. And that's the problem, is that the term PhD means someone who's made a unique contribution to human knowledge. That's the official terminology for it. But when you actually go to do a PhD, what they rapidly tell you is, well, it's pretty hard to find a niche where you can provide something significant in human knowledge, and therefore what you do instead is you narrow it down so small that you're bound to be producing something that's a unique contribution to human knowledge because no one else has written about that. So for example, if it was to be a study of the arguments presented at Speaker's Corner between July 2026 and August 2026 and how they might have been affected by the climatic changes in England during that time, that would certainly be a unique contribution. It may not be a worthwhile contribution, but it would be a unique contribution. And therefore that is the problem with the question of PhDs. It's not really about whether someone's plagiarising, although that of course is an issue, but it is in reality that a PhD has been devalued by the reality that not many people are even attempting to provide unique contributions to human knowledge of any significance.
Sam said you've got loads of PhDs. Does that mean they're all bollocks?
PhD.
Is it all a lot of bollocks then?
I happen to be the last person to have made a unique contribution to human knowledge.
So is it a lot of bollocks
in my PhD? I happen to be the last one.
What's your PhD?
My PhD is a study called Is China Still Socialist? And it was published in 2018 by King's College. You can find it on the British Library website. And it's a unique contribution because at that time, almost everybody in academia and also in the media said China was capitalist. And most Marxists also said China was capitalist, even in China.
Some of us say
and therefore I can reasonably argue that mine was a unique contribution because I presented specific and detailed arguments as to why China should be still defined as socialist according to nearly all mainstream criteria and also according to Marxist theoretical categories.
What about national socialists? Could they be national socialists?
They couldn't be national socialists in the sense which you mean, which I'm assuming you mean.
Remember, I don't believe in the Holocaust during World War II.
That's got nothing to do with the question we're discussing. What you just posed.
I just think they're just normal national socialists that put their fault first.
What do you mean by socialist?
Well, national socialism is from the left. What do you mean by the National Socialist Workers' Party in Germany?
That's not what I
from the left.
That's not what I asked.
I believe they're putting their folk first.
I said, if you're going to use the term national socialist,
in the modern terms of China.
Hang on a minute. So, as a methodology, if you want to start an analysis of something and you say, are they national socialists? Well, first you have to define what you mean by socialist. Because the national is a description in that case of the main term, socialist.
Yeah.
So if you have a description of socialism, which you can identify and categorise, and which people can accept or reject and test, then you've got a basis. Then you've got a basis to discuss the question. Otherwise, you don't.
I've got a rough idea what I mean.
So what do you mean?
They control a bit like fascism, where they tie them all in a stick and control them. In a way, it's pretty. All the institutions. So they work with the capitalist ideology, but it's all under control. So, because they are obviously very capitalist in China, but they're actually controlling.
That's not what I asked.
Well, that's what I believe by national socialism. They are allowing
but you haven't classified what socialism is.
Yes. Well, socialism could be whatever it means if you've got national socialism.
Doesn't
it
mean
could be like capitalism. Yeah. That's why the socialists hate national socialists
well,
and call them Nazis.
I don't agree
which
with
I don't even know what Nazi means.
I think that's too diffuse a definition to be able to provide a foundation for a coherent argument. Make some argument.
What does actually Nazi mean? What does it actually mean?
Well, the term is one thing.
Well, what does it
the
actually
reality
stand for?
is something else.
What does it stand for?
Well, I say the term is one thing. Sorry?
Is China a threat to world peace?
Well, let me just clarify this question.
Probably not.
How I regard it, and then I'll come on to the second question, because the two are interconnected together. Yeah? So, first of all, am I defining socialism as? A society in which public ownership of the commanding heights of the economy is dominant, a society in which the administration of that economy is revolving around the public sector, and in which some kind of party determined to maintain public ownership is in power.
Is there any room for
those are the
capitalism
three
in that?
that can still mean that there's capitalism, but it's not dominant.
It's still controlled by the state.
It's under the domination of the state.
Yeah, that's what national socialism was a bit like that in Germany, wasn't it?
Well, it's a bit, but not the same.
Yeah, it's a bit like it. That's what I said.
That's one thing. So why the second question, which was the question about is China considered a threat to the world, or is it a threat to the world? Well, it is a systemic threat because these systems are clashing about ownership over the decisive resources in society. Then there is a direct and irreconcilable clash between the two systems, and therefore America correctly considers China a lethal threat to its existence.
And would China not think the same in reflection?
I
think it's less about thinking the same. I think it's less about official doctrine in China says yes, we are seeking the transformation of the world, but they don't practically go and do that. Nevertheless, because of the condition that China is, the way that the system functions, it inevitably clashes with the American and the Western system of capitalism.
A bottle of water in my bag.
How will it be resolved? It will be resolved by war, or it will be resolved by revolution, or by counter-revolution. So in other words, either by the Western system becoming more like the Chinese, or by a military clash between the two powers in which one is victorious, or
That's
by...
already happening.
Victorious over the overall.
Yes.
It's already happening though.
This is a long-standing world historical phenomenon.
Trump's in a good position. That sort of like validates his stance and attitude towards China. Then because it
is what he said.
It is what he said. Get on board with it.
It is what he said. It is what he says.
Choose a side.
And in that respect,
red or blue corner, and go at it.
Well, in that respect, he's not wrong, and it's not just Donald Trump, by the way.
No.
It's the entire American establishment who argue that the system in China is in direct contradiction to the system in the Western world.
Is that true?
And it is true. It is true. It is true.
Yeah, it's threatening their hegemony.
It threatens their power and position.
Can we not live in a multipolar world? Can we not live in a world where
if you're Donald Trump,
these systems have to come into actual conflict with each other? Can they not exist largely apart in their own.
I think a lot of people believe that for a long time. The first person to argue that was actually Joseph Stalin. He argued that you would be able to maintain a system of socialism in the Soviet Union, which would develop independent of the Western world and would perhaps gradually win over support in other countries, but could compete internally economically against the Western world and eventually surpass the West. That was the argument he made, and that was repeated after the Second World War by Khrushchev and Brezhnev and Chernenko and the others who came to power up until 1989.
So if it's inevitable, it sounds to me pretty strong justification for Western colonial expansion.
Underneath the surface appearance of the argument between Donald Trump and the Democrats and the Chinese system, underneath the surface appearance of that clash between a communist party in China and the American government parties, or the uniparty system in America, and the uniparty system, by the way, in Britain, is a clash of the way in which society is organized. Society in the Western world is run by private corporations, by a small elite of private corporations which dominate the economy and through the economy control the political process. If you want to, Nigel Farage, the reason he squealed and shouted about what happened to him, I'll tell you 1 second, James, squealed and happened, wrung his hand, oh my God, they're complaining, I got £5 million, is because the entire political system throughout the Western world and the former colonies or imperially dominated countries is run by oligarchs and billionaires who pay politicians and political parties to do their bidding. And more, they also pay social opposition movements to appear to be opposing the governments, whereas in reality they are also campaigning for one wing or another wing of the ruling classes.
So how much you get?
And that clash of systems is the opposite way around in China. In China, public ownership dominates. The political parties are controlled by the Communist Party. They are agencies of the Communist Party. And there are no independent capitalist parties able to exert influence external to those parties that operate under the Communist Party. And therefore they have a monopoly control. Just the same is the mirror image. There is a monopoly control over politics in the Western world. To imagine anything else, however it appears to be, they allow you to stand up and speak in Hyde Park with limitations. They send various people to spy on you with cameras, live streams. So they collect information, they monitor opinion, and they seek to shape it. That's what the battle in AI is about. It's a clash of systems. The Chinese system, to be fair, they're on the winning side at the moment. Why are they on the winning side?
Tell us why.
Because unlike at the time of the internet, when the Chinese were unable to compete with Google, unable to compete with Facebook, unable to compete with the Western technological advantage which stemmed from the early phases of the internet, and ended with the Arab Spring in 2010, when complete control was exercised over the internet throughout the Arab world, and that transference of dominance over the internet was converted across the entire world, and the internet became the primary mechanism for the surveillance of the world's population and the manipulation of their opinions.
Wow.
And that turned around then, after 2020, into a technological mechanism to turn human beings into human robots and human sheep. And those human sheep and human robots were trained by standing 2 meters apart, by wearing masks, and by running for an injection under orders from the government, who knew nothing at all about pharmaceuticals, about medicine, and in particular, they knew nothing about the specific pharmaceuticals they ordered you to take. on pain of not having any freedom ever again and being locked away forever. That was the threat and trajectory which was advancing in Europe, America and Australasia in the period 2020 to 2023. It was not the same in China. In China there was no mandate to take any injection.
What about all the lockdowns?
There was no mRNA injection, so the new technology they used was not used in China. They encouraged people to use traditional medicine, and a third of the country at any time was under lockdown, no more than that. Much of the country was never under lockdown, but they don't tell you that because they want you to believe that some virus was manufactured in a lab in Wuhan and they poisoned the world and killed millions of people. That's the story they want you to believe. It is a lie.
Yes.
In fact, Xi Jinping tried to get rid of the lockdowns within 2 weeks of the very beginning of them, and they were encouraged to adopt lockdowns by agents of the Americans, in particular the Bill Gates Foundation and their epidemiological research centres, that they had wormed their way all over China and established. That was the mechanism to panic China into adopting a Western system in the attempt to bring down the Chinese government. And when that failed, then of course they fell for their own propaganda. They began to introduce lockdowns across the Western world, more draconian, by the way, than those that were imposed in China. Yes, there were a few pictures of China of overzealous psychopaths locking people up, but that's a few pictures, and those were shown on television and disseminated on the internet to make you all think something generic was going on across the whole of China and everyone was locked down forever. That's not true.
They had parties on New Year's Eve.
Sorry?
Boris did. Boris.
China.
On the very first New Year's Eve in China, by that I mean Chinese New Year, everyone was together. That's how they knew it wasn't actually a threat, because before the lockdown came in Wuhan in China, everybody in the country had moved.
There was a big
They
thing
had
about them
had
flying back to
1,000
America.
million people move in the 2 weeks before the lockdown. So if ever there was a better case for such a transmitted virus to spread, then that was it. And yet, when they studied the data, nothing had happened over Chinese New Year, when everyone travelled and everyone got together over dinner. And that's why Xi Jinping said, end the lockdowns. He wasn't able to do it because there was resistance from below by lower level bureaucrats demanding the protection of the health, just the same as there was in the Western world. Goons on the doors of the shops saying don't do this, don't do that, where this lower level petty bureaucrats all thought they were suddenly elevated into somebody important. An example of that is the idiots they put on they rolled out onto television. Patrick Vallance, Chris Whitty, Neil Ferguson, all these goons that they rolled out and made into pop stars, and Bill Gates at the same. They made into pop stars standing on television with data drawn up by Palantir, by the way, drawn up by the AI intelligence company Palantir, data on the numbers infected today. They didn't have a clue how many people were, in inverted commas, infected. They didn't have the slightest
Nobody
idea
was infected.
because the test they had did not differentiate between one coronavirus and another coronavirus, and all coronavirus according to their methodology. And their coronavirus methodology had always shown that in a flu season 10% of people get coronaviruses. That's always been the case. Probably 2,000 and 20,000 and 200,000 years ago it was the case. But they focused on it. If they wanted to focus on what people are getting now, when you see someone sniff, someone get a cold, someone become ill, then they could do that. But of course no one would take any notice anymore. No one would take any. If they told you tomorrow, as they tried in the last few months to do, oh, there's meningitis, everyone's going to die,